Double crochet is a much taller and looser stitch than single crochet or half double crochet, which makes it really good for projects that you want to move fast, but that don't need a lot of structure, like a blanket. Double crochet is one of those strange stitches where the turning chain actually counts as a stitch. It creates sort of some holes in the sides of your crochet piece, but that's perfectly normal. Now you can go without doing the turning chain counting as a stitch, but you get sort of a wavy pattern here. So you can kind of decide what you like and what you prefer. To begin, make a slip knot and then chain 12 stitches. For double crochet, we need 2 more chains than the number of stitches that we're going to work. So in this case, we have 2 extra chains so that we can make 10 double crochets. Okay, now that I have my 12 chain stitches, I am ready to begin. So double crochet, kind of like half double crochet, it starts with a yarn over. So go ahead and yarn over. But instead of going into the 3rd chain here, like with half double crochet, we're actually going to go into our 4th chain. So we're skipping 3 chains. These 3 are our turning chain, and we're going into the 4th chain. Now what's special about double crochet is these 3 chains we're skipping as our turning chain will also count as our first stitch. So let's go ahead and make our first double crochet. So skip 3 and go into the 4th chain from your hook. I've already done my yarn over, and I'm going into the 4th chain. Yarn over, and pull up a loop, and you should have 3 loops on your hook. Now, yarn over and pull through just the first 2 stitches, and you should have 2 loops remaining. And again, yarn over and pull through 2 stitches, so that you're back to 1 stitch. So let's look at what we have here. We have our 3 turning chains, and they actually count as our first stitch. We also have our first double crochet here that counts as our 2nd stitch. In the 8 chains that remain, we're going to make 8 more double crochets, which will bring our total to 10 double crochets. All right, let's make another double crochet in our next chain here. Yarn over, go into that next chain. I'm pulling up so I can see I've already gone there and I need to go here next. Go into that chain, yarn over, and pull up your loop. You should have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through just the first 2. Yarn over and pull through 2 again, and that completes your double crochet. So keep making your double crochets all the way across, and I will meet you at the end of this chain. It looks like I've made it to my last chain here, but of course I'm going to stop and count. So if I uncurl this here, I'm looking at my double crochets, but I can't forget that this turning chain here in the beginning counts as my first stitch. So these 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, right here are actually stitch number 1. Then this little post right here with its chain looking top is stitch number 2. So 1 and then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So I am on my last stitch here. So I'm going to go ahead and yarn over, dive into that last stitch. It can always be a little tight. Yarn over and pull up a loop, 3 loops on my hook. Yarn over, pull through just the first 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. And that will complete our first row of double crochet. The second row and all the other rows are worked exactly the same. So first we need to make our turning chain. In double crochet, we need a 3 stitch turning chain. 1, 2, and 3. Then we're going to turn counterclockwise so that we're ready to go from left to right again. Now we're going to skip these 3 turning chains, of course, And you would think, since on our first row we skipped 3 and went in the 4th chain, that we would go in the first stitch right here. But we're actually going to go into this stitch, the 2nd stitch, and that's because our 3 turning chains count as our first stitch. So we're going to skip this stitch to compensate for that. So we're going to skip these 3 turning chains and then also skip the first stitch and start with the 2nd stitch. Yarn over, skip the 3 turning chains and the first stitch, and we're going to go into the 2nd stitch here. Make sure you go under both strands of that stitch, yarn over and pull up a loop, pulling through both strands of the stitch, and you should have 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through just the first 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 again to complete your first double crochet. Now, we actually know that this right here is our first stitch of the row. It's the 3 chains that were our turning chain. And you can see the gap from the stitch that we skipped. So this is stitch number 1, and this one is stitch number 2, and we have 8 more to go. So I'm going to keep making my double crochets across, and I will meet you at the end. Alright, I am nearing the end of my row here. What it looks like is I've got 1 more double crochet from down the row below left, and of course I also have this turning chain that I need to go into. So if these are my last 2 stitches, then I should have 8 stitches here. So I'm going to check. I know the turning chain is my first stitch because it counts as my first stitch. So these 3 are my stitch number 1. Here's number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Alright, so my second to last stitch, my 9th stitch, is pretty easy. Yarn over. I'm just going to go into the stitch just like I've been doing for the entire row. Yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. The last stitch is where things get a little different. So this last stitch here is going to be worked in the turning chain. And I've got 3 stitches here, 1, 2, and 3, but they're kind of hard to see. But if you look, we're actually looking at the back of the stitch, and I know that because I can see these little bumps, which we sometimes call the butt of the stitch. Where I want to go is right underneath. I want to go in the top turning chain, so this one right here, the 3rd one, but I also want to go underneath the butt right into there. So I'm going to show you without the yarn over first so you can see what that looks like. So I want to go right here underneath, and I'm grabbing 2 strands, okay? So I'm getting the butt, and then I'm getting this right here. So I just go right underneath it and get those 2 strands from the top of that turning chain. Okay, so now let's actually make that a double crochet. So yarn over, and then we're going to find that 1, 2, 3 top turning chain and go right underneath it so that I get 2 strands. There we go. Yarn over and pull up a loop. Yarn over, pull through 2. Yarn over, pull through 2. And then I've completed my 2nd row of double crochet. Let's go ahead and begin our 3rd row. We begin with 3 chains, 3 turning chains that also count as our first stitch. Then we're going to turn counterclockwise so we can go left to right again. We're going to skip these 3 turning chains and the first stitch because our 3 turning chains count as our first stitch. So we're actually going to start in the 2nd stitch there. Yarn over, skip the 3 turning chains and the first stitch, and we're going into our 2nd stitch here. Pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now I'm going to keep making my double crochets across so that I can meet you at the end of this row so we can look at how that looks one more time. I can tell that I'm getting towards the end of the row, but I know that I'm not quite there yet because it doesn't look as straight as this side here. So if I look, I've got 1 more stitch left, and then I've got my turning chain again. So let's go ahead and do that last stitch. This will be number 9 of the row. And then my last stitch, my 10th one, is going to be worked in the turning chain. So it's a 3-stitch turning chain, and I want to go in the very top here so I can see it. It's a little bit twisty, but 1, 2, and 3, and this is where I want to go in the top one. Yarn over, go underneath that little butt, right in there, and get those 2 strands. Yarn over and pull through the stitch. Yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2 again. And you can see as soon as you go into that turning chain, it just evens up that side of your double crochet. Now you know how to make the double crochet stitch. When you're ready to try something new, I would suggest trying the triple crochet or treble crochet next.